Swamp Thing, Volume 2, Issue 22, Swamped. This follows up the previous issue, the anatomy lesson, where Malamore reboots the Swamp Thing, introduces some characters from the previous volume, and kind of resets the Swamp Thing. So this issue introduces two additional major characters in this previous Swamp Thing runs. This is Abigail Arcane, or Abigail Cable, and Matt Cable. Now, from what I know, Matt Cable used to be some type of government agent that was in the trail of the Swamp Thing, or I think they were trying to get to the Swamp Thing before the Sunderlands did, and he met Abigail in the Balkans, and Abigail became his wife. Now they're in Louisiana. They're looking for the Swamp Thing. She's been in the swamps, and she's very engaged in trying to find him. And then they come across him in the swamp, and they realize that's his body, and he's rooted in the ground. And I just love this detail, all this detail you see here. This is the splash page. And I just love how this is from the previous issue. This is the first page, and then this is the splash page and the second page. But all this detail, this color, how they tie in the title, they just kind of drawn in here like the water running. The coloring, it's not your standard superhero type of coloring and art. So to proceed with the story, they find him, they don't know what to do. And Jason Woodrue, who was introduced in the previous issue, has been observing him. He meets the Cables and tells them, oh, I was hired to study him, and I helped him get out, and I followed him here. I'm trying to help him. And they're like, okay, well, we're nearby in a motel nearby in Huma. You can find us there. And there's like 2 or 3 stories that are going on at the same time. And Alan Moore is just really good at doing a little bit of story here, then the second story, then the third story, then going back. But in a way that's not confusing, but progresses the story. It's really just excellent writing and story structure. Because that's where he introduces Woodrow, and Woodrow's thinking, what's going on here? What's going on in your mind? You see in the Swamp Thing's brain, he's sort of like dealing with the psychosis or the mental shock of realizing that he really is not Alec Holland. He's a shell of Alec Holland. And so he's here just laying down in the swamp with all this going on through his head. Then you go back to Abigail Cable, who is having problems with her marriage with Matt. She comes to the motel room they're staying at. She swears she sees Matt with what looks like another woman and these weird creatures, and she pushes open the door, and everything's clear. And she's like, Matt. And then there's nothing there. He's like, yes. So she's wondering if she's going nuts. She's not. That'll be explained next issues. Then they go back to Woodrue. And then they go back to Swamp Thing. Like, I guess this battle for his own sanity. And at this point, he's trying to carry in his mind the skeleton of Alec Holland and his dead wife, Linda. And he's struggling, and then at this point he says, I'm sorry, Linda, I can't carry us both. And he moves on. Then you go back to Abigail trying to find Alec, and she really cares about Alec, and it seems like it's more than just caring. And Matt is actually feeling jealous because she seems like obsessed trying to find Alec and just trying to help him in some way. And then Woodrew's observing, and then you go back to Swamp Thing in his mind, trying to battle. And there's just a scene where everybody is just trying to grab, and all these are characters that have been in the book before, and they're all trying to grab his skeleton. He's like, no, this is just mine. And he runs off with like his skeleton. He's like holding on to the last vestiges of Alec Holland. Then you go back, Woodrew's conducting an experiment, 1 page. And then Swamp Thing is running, and the skeleton's talking to him, saying, yeah, you gotta keep on running, because if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have to run. And Swamp Thing says, yeah, you're right. So he just sits down in his mind, lays down, and just becomes rooted. Physically he's rooted, but mentally he's under great stress. But now he just sort of says, yeah, there's no point in me trying to cling on to this idea of humanity because I'm not human. And then he just tunes out. Then to proceed with the experiment, I love and so I'll talk about the art in a minute. He connects the Swamp Thing to try to get in touch with the plant world. He feels the grass outside. He gets in contact with the redwoods in California, seaweed off of Samoa, and then grass in Africa. And it's too much. And he sort of goes berserk and he runs outside, breaks out of his lab. And he's out there and he's saying, stop, please. What would you have me do? And he stays quiet. What would you have me do? And you don't hear anything, but you see him like exult in this happiness. And you'll find out what the plant world told him. But this sets up the first of the 3-issue arc. Now, going back, Alan Moore is really great at doing this thing where one sentence leads into a next. Because in this, like one scene, Jason Woodrue took a tuber, looks like a yam from Swamp Thing's body, he's eating it, and he's saying to himself, perfectly edible. And then the next scene starts, eats, come and get your eats. So he does this thing where either the theme of eating is the same, or he will like end one sentence with the last word missing, and that last word is the first word in the following sentence. It's an Alan Moore thing that he does so well, and he does it over and over again, and it kind of just leads you to the story. It's not like, okay, I can finish here and he cut to the scene. It's a connection between a scene here and a scene there. Let me find a quick example. Besides the one that I showed you. And here also, like, he'll talk about being swamped, which is the title of the story, where mentally he's swamped. He's swamped as well because he's swamped. Like there's so much plant information. His mind is swamped. So Alan Moore will do these things where it's the end of one scene, but it connects to the next scene using the words and the dialogue. And the art is by Bossette and Tottleben, and I just love this continued use of unorthodox panels. Just doing one horizontal panel, just these thin vertical panels that kind of move the story, and then kind of like also break. This actually breaks the border, and then you have this. The second page is a splash page, and you have so much. It actually feels like you're in a swamp, because sometimes, like if you've ever seen some old movies that take place like for the Vietnam War, you were seeing the Green Berets and they're supposed to be like in the jungles. It doesn't look like a jungle. It looks like something in California. This looks like you're in the middle of just swamp. It's just drawn where you feel like there's just this, you're surrounded by trees and rain. It's pretty realistic for art. These sequences, they're lightly colored. They're not the same color palette as what's going on in reality. They're more pastel, more pinks, just to kind of show you visually that he's in his mind here. And then you go back to the regular coloring, and then Matt is using these abilities, and it's red and yellow, and it looks, kind of looks like, I wouldn't say evil, but looks malevolent. Again, these pastel colors when they're running around in Swamp Thing's mind, here and here, then back to the regular coloring. It's a really effective use of the art, but not just the pencil line art, but the colors. I love these close-ups, just to kind of like break up the monotony. And then here again, you have these pastel colors, but now you have the black borders here to kind of show a little bit of tension. And again, those nice pastels. Swamp Thing in his mind. This is the way that he looked like in the earlier volumes before Alan Moore took over, where he's almost like he's like a green, but almost looks like a suit that's covered in like grass, like short grass. And then to show all these different locations, they just did these vertical panels, and here you have the eyes kind of going across, getting redder and bigger, kind of showing more tension and more buildup. And then just this look of horror, and then peace, and then exaltation. And then in the next book, you'll find out what the plants have done, and you'll see how Woodrow goes from Class C villain to Class A threat. Thanks.